All right, welcome to lesson 4 for chapter 6. We are still talking about ecology. This lesson is going to focus on communities in ecology. So learning goal is that you should be able to describe what a community is and identify key concepts about ecological communities. So for success criteria, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain the concept of an ecological community. So what is it? Explain how the concept of an ecological niche is valuable in helping visualize the role of an animal in the environment, and then differentiate between serial and climax community stages in terms of community stability and biodiversity. These are still all things that are covered in both biology and in environmental science. So communities. Communities are all populations living in an area. So if populations are one specific species, like a group of one species, and communities are all populations, that means that communities are all of the living things in an area, because all living things would fall into a population. So all populations mean it's all of the living things. Within those communities, we have different kind of groups. So one group is going to be a ketone species. This is one specific species, so that population within the community. This is a species of overriding importance in determining community characteristics. So all species are important, but keystone species are what shape that ecosystem. Sometimes they're a top predator, sometimes they aren't. The bison or buffalo in grasslands, they are considered a keystone species because they truly shape the environment. They tramp down the grass, and that helps make sure that there's not tons of trees growing. They are shaping the grassland, so they are a keystone species. And then what we also look at in communities is community or species diversity. And this is the variety of organisms in a community. There's different ways to measure that. It could literally be how many different species are there, but usually we're also looking at the evenness. So how distributed is it? How truly diverse is it? All right, so what is a niche or niche, depending on how fancy you want to be? A niche is all attributes of an animal's lifestyle. It's where they live, it's what they eat, it's what they do, it's their job, it's everything. So interspecific competition results when niches overlap. So interspecific competition is competition between different species. So if there's two different species that eat acorns in the spring, that's a niche overlap, and so there's going to be competition for that resource. An actual or a realized niche is often smaller than potential or fundamental. So potential or fundamental is where you could theoretically actually survive or live, and then the actual or realized niche is what's actually happening, what's been realized by that species, that organism. Community members complement each other in resource use because no two species can have the same exact niche. They kind of forces complementing because each has their specific role within the community. And then what can happen is also partitioning resources, and that allows competing species to coexist. So we'll have like birds that feed specific parts of the tree, or it could be, like on the next slide, different types of like barnacles or clams living in specific parts of the rock during low or high tide. So what we can see here also is the realized niches versus the fundamental. So the fundamental are going to be typically longer than the actual realized. All right. Communities are constantly changing, and that change is called succession. So in succession, dominant members of a community change the community in predictable ways. We can usually kind of predict what those steps are going to look like. And the pioneer community is the community that's really first starting that. So we have primary succession, we have secondary succession. Primary succession is we are starting from scratch, bare rock, nothing going on there. So our pioneer community is typically lichens that are coming in and breaking down those rocks and really starting to form soil. Secondary succession, we already have soil there and we skip a couple steps. And those serial stages are each one of the successional stages. So life forms make area less fit for themselves, which sounds counterintuitive. Lichen likes to live on bare rock, but while they're living on bare rock, they're breaking down that bare rock to form soil so that other species can live. And eventually there's not going to be bare rock for the lichen to live in. But it's what allows succession to move on so that that community is shaping into its full climax community at the end. That doesn't mean the climax community is the end of the story and nothing ever happens. It is stable on its own with nothing happening. It lives like that for a long time. The species diversity, the species present isn't going to change. What can change is a fire, a natural disaster, clear cutting from humans. That would destroy that community, and then we would have secondary succession come in and it would start again. So this graphic, you can pause and take a look. There's a lot of information going on here, but these are our different stages in succession. This is obviously an example of a forest, a deciduous forest specifically, but we're starting with nothing, and then the first thing that we see is bare rock, and then we can see that go down over time because what we see is mosses and grasses and lichen coming in to start breaking that down, and then as those organisms die, they add organic material back in, and then the grasses and perennials take over. And so over time, each one of these like species groups kind of has a peak, and then they go down as we go into the next stage until we reach the climax community. And then what's increasing as well is the biodiversity, biomass, and the soil there over time. All right, that is the end of this lesson. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next one.